Welcome to the Lensrentals Podcast. I'm Ryan Hill. This week, it's the season finale. Before we take a little late summer break, I invited Joey and Roger in for a freewheeling discussion on whatever they wanted to talk about. We each brought in a topic, and we're going to end the season by going wherever the wind takes us. Here are Joey and Roger. Welcome to the Lensrentals Podcast. Joey and Roger, how are you?
Good.
Still hating Doctor Who.
We had a long conversation about either liking or not liking Doctor Who at the beginning of this recording that I will cut out, but now you get to hear Joey's stance.
Yeah, Red Dwarf is better.
I'm also not a Doctor Who guy. Roger,
I've never even seen
the
it.
Listeners could guess. You're not a Doctor Who
Not
guy.
a Doctor Who guy.
So we were arguing. We all agree, but we're arguing about Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And just because I hadn't seen it doesn't mean I don't have strong opinions.
Right.
Oh, yeah, certainly. If the listeners have learned nothing else, they've learned that from our podcast here.
Often wrong, never in doubt.
Yes, exactly.
I saw a tweet today. It was like, here's two responses from Oscar voters that tells you why the Oscars mean nothing. And one of them was like, yeah, I'd never seen the movie. I had no plans to see it, but I saw the ad for it, and it was just like this dead beast. And I thought, man, that's cool. So I voted for it without even seeing it because that was cool.
What movie is this?
Leviathan is who we voted for.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? That turns out to be a great vote. The documentary Leviathan rules.
Well, and he admitted in his answer there that like the Oscars are bullshit. Like
Yeah.
bullshit.
I was mad that Leviathan didn't win the best documentary Oscar. Leviathan is great.
What's it about?
It's very
What Joe's asking is, what does Leviathan mean?
so it's like about
I've read the Bible. I know
it's kind of
what
like
Leviathan
about
means.
deep sea fishermen, and it's not like very plot or dialogue driven. I mean, it's a documentary,
Yeah.
but it's even for a documentary, it's not very narrative.
I mean, that makes sense that it's about the deep sea.
Yeah, it's kind of just a bunch of footage of deep sea fishermen, and it's awesome.
Okay.
Check out Leviathan.
That's why everybody tuned into a photography podcast. That's for certain.
Yeah, there we
Movie
go.
Rex. Movie Rex.
So what we're going to do today, this is our season finale. Thought we would do a nice freewheeling one so we didn't have to do a lot of homework. I just asked everybody to bring in a topic that we have not covered on this podcast yet that you want to talk about, and we'll chat about it for like 10 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Do you have your topics?
Sure.
Yes.
All right, everybody's ready to go?
Yeah.
I'm so ready.
Who wants to go first?
I do.
Yep. I want
Yep.
Roger to go first.
All right, beautiful. Roger,
My
take it away.
topic is, are all reviews utter bullshit?
Okay.
The-
I'm guessing
90% of them are.
the answer to that question is yes. Yeah.
Well, I hate to use all, but I would say the great majority, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about why. And, most people don't see behind the curtain very much. And I've spent more than a decade behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of things everybody should know. And one is that it has changed over the last decade. And it's not changed for the better. But reviewers make a living and get cool shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you become a reviewer. And you love photography or videography.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think people really realize how that works. And for one thing, in the category of it is bullshit, if a review comes out within the week after the product's announced, it is utter bullshit, because that means the reviewer got the item before it was released. Therefore, he's on the manufacturer's hot list. And how do you stay on the hot list? You give good reviews.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, literally, they'll just take your early item away. You won't get them next time.
Right.
And there's big money in having that first week review. That's where you get the clicks. That's where you get the stuff. So the worst review you're going to see from an early reviewer is, it was really good. It's the most they can possibly do is damn with faint praise.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They can't say it sucks. There are kind of some sort of exceptions. The really huge review systems, say DP Review or whatever, have enough clout to stay on the list with an occasional bad review. But otherwise, you give one bad review, you're off the list. You're out of the game.
Right.
Also, half the time, you will see a little bitty blurb of, I went on a junket to Hawaii to review this equipment.
Who
if
paid for
they
that?
take you to Hawaii, you ain't writing a bad review because you want to go to Tahiti next year. I mean, that's just givens. Third is then you get the group of how do I get the most clicks? Say whatever will generate controversy. And it doesn't matter if it's right, wrong, or indifferent. Mm-hmm. So the day the scientific review is largely over, there are some. They are not the most popular. They are small, dedicated people, most of them working professionals who also review.
It's just cronyism is all.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. What's funny is what you're describing, first of all, obviously not exclusive to photography and videography equipment.
Oh,
this is basically any review ever of anything. It's expensive to have a team full of professionals in an office working full time and purchasing stuff and spending the time to review it. And it's cheap and easy to just email, I don't know, Samsung or whatever and be like, hey, I'll review your thing if you send it to me for free.
Right.
Broadly, you're also describing media in general.
True.
Which is
current media in general.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't want to get all media-y on this, but newspapers are dying, and saying the craziest thing you can think of on Twitter is a way to make money now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I guess that's all I'm saying. What you're saying can get kind of extrapolated out broadly to describe current media culture in general.
I thought the free market was a good thing.
Well, to some degree it is. There's also another thing. Remember that early reviewer who I said got his stuff early? Do you think they didn't handpick the stuff they sent out?
Oh, right. Exactly. Yeah.
And to be very clear, I was paid by manufacturers to do the hand picking for some items. So they would send me 60 and say, get 30 good ones. And speaking of those reviews, if anybody isn't aware that it is big money to go buy reviews, positive and negative. Mm-hmm. And one of my intros to this came about, it was probably 8 or 9 years ago. I wrote a really bad review. And suddenly our blog for the first time had all these comments, and they were all about what an idiot I was, and I didn't know what I was talking about, which was unusual. I mean, I'm not saying it was incorrect. It was just unusual. And then we tracked them, and they were all posted from Romania and Hungary.
The fan bots came out.
So
it's so deeply weird to me. I don't understand the economics of why that is advantageous for anyone. Well, it has to be advantageous for somebody, but I don't get.
Well, let's look at this example. I gave a bad review. What's the easiest way to negate that bad review is to discredit me. Mm-hmm. Or if I made a 3514 and this other company made a 3514, I want to pimp mine and might as well trash theirs too. So that's very common. It's very inexpensive. I think the going rate is like $2.50 a review.
Yeah, we get emails like that all the time too.
And about $5
people coming in and be like, "Hey, we'll charge you this much for like 1 million positive Google reviews."
Right. So that's something you can't really trust anymore.
The internet is the ultimate loudest voice wins. Like that's the way it's built.
There are exceptions. So all this stuff you see is an outcome of people getting what they want, not getting what they want, negotiating their way into and out of different agreements. I had a company at one point come to me and say, we would like you to write better reviews. And I laughed and we didn't talk anymore. And then they came back about 7 months later with a different person who said, we want you to be a consultant and we're going to pay you. Well, for some people would have been a significant. If I was just a reviewer, it would have been a lot of money. All we ask is that everything we tell you, you can't write about. And we're going to tell you everything, which basically was just a sneaky way of going, you can't review our products anymore. And we're going to pay you to not do it.
It was wild because we don't often do straight reviews.
We did a lot of optical reviews for a lot of years.
But even that isn't like, hey, here's some pictures I took and here's what I think of them.
No, we
it's
would
more just like, we ran this through a machine.
Yeah. And it's not nearly as good as this other one.
Right. It's like an objective judgment though.
Right.
I mean,
some of it was just don't publish it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just that stuff goes on.
Hey, Pentax, if you're listening, if you want me to stop bashing you, just pay me. It's fucking awesome. Money talks, man.
It does.
The Pentax executives are in their boardroom right now, sweat dripping down their forehead. We're terrified of what Joey Miller has to say.
It
on
won't
the
even
Lensrentals
cost
podcast.
them much. Like, I'm cheap.
So anyway, I guess long story short, you should probably not trust like 99% of anything you read on the internet about any topic.
If you don't know the person, don't trust it.
Yeah.
And same goes for forums. Like, if you have a problem with your gear, you go to a forum to find an answer, you're going to find a million other people that have that same problem because they're all posting in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to find a million other people who tell you it's your technique.
Right.
Yeah.
You're never going to come out with a clear answer.
Yeah, it's best to find a source you trust and only use them. And I'm not saying that source is us.
Right.
No.
But then
And
also,
like I said,
We're out
the
of the game
closest
now.
we get to reviews typically are those MTF tests, which I would not call reviews.
No,
Right.
they're tests.
but also realize
Like
that,
we repeat often in those articles, like a lens being sharper doesn't necessarily mean it's a better lens.
right.
I mean, it just means it's sharper. This is just what we're seeing on this machine.
You know what the whole purpose of those articles was early on? If you go back to 2009, 10, 11, when we started, the whole purpose was every copy's not the same.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Because at the time, people thought every copy was the same. And when we started putting out proof that it wasn't, you know who was the most upset? The reviewers.
Yep.
I just wrote a 30-page article on this copy, and you're telling me it may not be the same as all the other copies. You must be wrong. You've got to be wrong. I wasn't wrong.
Uh-uh.
But I think everybody accepts that now. But in the day, it was, you believed if you got 20 lenses and you shot with every one, they were identical.
There is no way to make an identical thing. There's no way to do it.
And given that thing that it is different, two legitimate reviewers may have different opinions because they had two different copies. I mean, that just happens too. So,
Yeah, and like at the production tolerances we're talking about, the things that can make the difference, like we're talking about light passing through glass, like it's the difference in sharpness could be down to like microns of space between particular elements. It's just
it is
impossible, especially at any reasonable price, to manufacture these things as exact replicas of each other.
right. So it's I guess that's my point is you go out and you read the internet, you throw out everything that came in the first week, and you throw out everything that's got obvious clickbait stuff, and you look at the rest and figure it's a shotgun pattern.
Yeah,
They're going to differ. They'll be kind of like this, pretty close, but you can't go. This reviewer hit a bullseye because he can't. He's shooting a shotgun.
all right. I think that about covers that. We opened pretty negative.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping. Well, I don't know. Do you want to go, Joey, or do you want me to go? Or do you want to wrap us up? I'm going to talk about another depressing thing, which is working as a production assistant in the film industry.
I mean, I don't think mine's any happier. I was going to talk about pay transparency.
Let's do mine, and then we'll end on yours. That'll be good.
Maybe we can come up with some happy note to end on.
So I know I've talked to Joey about this before, but I don't know if I've talked to you, Roger, about this. I worked as a production assistant in the film industry before I started working here. And that experience was very helpful, I think, in me learning a lot of stuff. But overall, I think it is a bad industry that needs a lot of improvement. So a little bit about the history. I worked as a PA, camera assistant, locations assistant in Wilmington, North Carolina. Out of college, I was like, well, I have this film degree. I want to, work on set, but I don't want to live in New York or LA. I have just spent 4 years being really, really poor. So I would like to move somewhere where I can afford to live. So I moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, where my girlfriend actually recommended it because they had shot Dawson's Creek there. I don't know if you know Dawson's Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the vibe. It's like a coastal North Carolina town where at the time they were shooting a lot of stuff. So I worked on a few TV shows and a few movies, a lot of commercials, stuff like that. And the pay is very bad. We've covered this a little bit on the podcast before. The pay, especially for PAs, is very bad, and the hours you're working are insane. It reminded me a lot of the restaurant industry, where I think you get a lot of people going into it because they're like, hey, I like cooking food and I like providing a service for people. And I think you get a lot of people who come in very illusioned and then are immediately disillusioned by the process.
And we start at 4 a.m.
Yes,
Yeah.
That is exactly right. And a lot of the time, PAs are not the first people there, but a lot of the time PAs are among the first people there, and they're among the last to leave, and they are the only people on set a lot of the time that are not in a union. And my rate usually, I don't know if this has changed. My rate, they called it 135 over 12. You would get that in like the email, like we're hiring you for 135 over 12. So you get $135 for 12 hours.
Jesus.
So about, like $11.50 an hour?
Yeah.
Then you got time and a half for the next 6 hours. So up to 18 hours, between 12 and 18 hours, you're making time and a half. So $16.50 an hour. And then after 18, which happens more often than you would think, you're making double time. So 22. My longest day was 22 hours. Long story short, what I'm saying is PAs need to unionize. Please stop me if you have any questions. Yeah, please stop me if you have any questions, because I will ramble about this for
I think
15 minutes.
I think PAs need to unionize. I think freelance photographers need to unionize. I think they all need to unionize.
We're going to cover that, I think, in your pay transparency.
I mean, we can wrap all these two together.
Yeah, they're the same thing.
They are the same thing.
And I wanted to tell you a very kind of indicative story of how sad that was. But can I tell you first, Roger, how I got my first PA job?
This is such a good story.
This is more of a fun story.
This is such a good story.
I think we recorded this for the podcast, but I don't think we actually ended up putting it in the episode. But so we cut it previously. The first thing I worked on, and I was really, really happy to get this job because I loved the show before I moved out there. It was like something I was hoping to get a job on by moving to North Carolina. It was called Eastbound and Down. Do you know? Comedy show on HBO. I loved it when it was airing. I had seen the first season, and the second season was about to air when I moved out there. So I got a job working on the third season of Eastbound and Down, which is kind of like it's a comedy about a guy who was a professional baseball player and kind of like washed out of professional baseball and like ruined his life and has to move back to a small town in North Carolina to teach gym at a public high school.
It's Danny McBride.
It's a Danny McBride show. It's great. It rules. I loved it so much. And it was a really fun work experience. And the way I got that job was I found a Craigslist ad. Like some guy who's like, I work as a grip in Wilmington. I want to learn how to edit. I need somebody to teach me how to edit. I'll pay you such and such an hour. So I emailed the guy. We kind of like start these classes. I'm teaching him how to edit like on my laptop in my living room. He mentions he works on Eastbound and Down. I was like, hey, you don't have to pay me if you get me like on set, just like for a day. I'm not even saying get me a full-time job. Like get me on there to like be a PA and prove that I can show up on time and all that. So he does that. My first day on set, the prop master had like called in sick. And we're in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and we're about to shoot this big party scene. The guy who would normally do this is not there. The props folks, it's kind of a small prop team, are like in a little bit of a tizzy trying to figure this out. We have a bunch of like prop joints we need for this party scene. And there are no like prop joints. It's a big Rubbermaid container full of prop like herbal marijuana fake and a big like box full of rolling papers. And they're like, we don't have time to do this. We need like 1 million joints. We're shooting this thing all day. Who can roll a joint? Who can roll a joint? Who can roll a joint? I'm like, hey, me, I'm on set. I can do this. I will sit here at this folding table and roll joints for you all day. And I did that. And then they gave me a full-time job as a PA. It was great.
Those must have been some good joints you rolled.
They were probably the worst joints anybody has ever seen in their life. But yeah, they got the job done and I got a job out of it and it was awesome.
That's cool.
It was very fun. And so I did that. That was like my first big gig. And now on to the depressing story. This is like what made me decide maybe I don't want to like full-time do this for the rest of my life. So like I said, we were shooting this show in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And like half of the shoot was in Myrtle Beach and half was in Wilmington. So we shot all the Myrtle Beach stuff at once. So I'm living in the Myrtle Beach Hilton for 6 weeks. Which it felt so luxurious at first. For like the first couple of days, you're like, oh my God, this is the life. I'm living in a hotel. I have just graduated college. I'm making like good money for the time because I'm working so many hours. Then like day 4 or 5, you're like, this is extremely depressing lifestyle. And so normally you would like have a couple of drinks in the lobby bar at the end of your workday. So I was doing that one night. This is probably like a week into my experience. And at the time I'm smoking, so I go outside to smoke a cigarette, and the first AD is there. And AD is like my boss's boss. This is the guy who the director is like making creative decisions and directing actors. And the AD is the guy who's like, we need this person on set next, and we're running behind schedule, or this shot's up next. It's kind of managing things logistically.
Almost like a stage manager for a film.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very difficult job. And this is not a local guy. This is a guy in from like LA. And so he knows that this is like my first job. And so he's like, do you think you're going to, do this full time for a living? And I'm like, I don't know. The hours are tough. And I'm not seeing my girlfriend very much and all that. But, you know, I'm getting to see and do some really cool things. And this is something I've always wanted to do. So I don't know. And he tells me this story. He was an AD on The Truman Show. Do you know the movie The Truman Show?
Mm-hmm.
Shot in Florida. Peter Weir directed it. And this was not like an accident on set or something. Nothing against the movie. But like a crew member died. It was just an older guy, had a heart attack. You know, things happen. Peter Weir later finds out from the crew that the guy doesn't really have any family. He's just like a local grip dude. So Peter Weir, this is rare in the film industry, gives the whole crew the day off. They call off shooting for a day to attend this guy's funeral. That's awesome. Peter Weir pays for the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Which is super cool of Australian auteur Peter Weir. And so he tells me this story, the AD, as like a motivation thing. Like, you know, we're
all family.
Yeah. It's like it's familial. It's like, it's a calling. You know, if you're meant to do this, you're meant to do this. And we all like stick together. And at the time, like a couple of glasses of wine in, and I can like see the beach from the front of the Myrtle Beach Hilton. I'm like, yeah, very cool story. I like, maybe this is my calling. Maybe I do need to be in like this movie family. But then you go to bed and you wake up the next day and you're like alone in the Myrtle Beach Hilton. You're by yourself for like the 10th day in a row. And I'm like, maybe I like don't want Peter Weir to pay for my funeral. Maybe that's not the ultimate goal here.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to do something different and normal for a living. Yeah, that's the end of that depressing story. I stayed doing it for like years, but I don't know. It's
always been interesting to me being here,
mm-hmm.
how people have come in from different things and kind of found a niche here where you got still a little hand in on what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But you work fairly reasonable hours most of the year and get paid decent.
Right.
And, have a life and
401k and health insurance.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. See my wife at night. And
you don't have to worry, where's my next gig coming from? So
yeah, that was the biggest thing. I would work for like 3 weeks at a time, then 10 bar for 2 weeks, and then quit my bar job and start a movie.
When
and
guys like you first started coming
over
here, I was like, wow, that was such a cool job. Why do you want to come here? And, then I've discovered after listening to lots of stories.
Far from the only person at Lensrentals who has had this experience.
Yeah. Well, and like one of the biggest red flags of that story is like anytime an employer comes to you and says, we're family, that is red flag.
Yeah.
They're going to exploit you because they
That's
feel
100%
like,
true.
If you're fostering a family mindset, well, your family asks you to do shit for free all the time.
The weird
but this is a job.
Is that like, I think in a lot of cases, a boss at like the Gap or whatever saying like, we're all family at the Gap, does not himself believe that.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I think this dude who was telling me this story genuinely,
he drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, he was on board.
On the other hand, when you were telling the story, my first thought is, here's this guy that worked in the industry and he died alone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the stark
and like had plenty of people at his funeral, but
because they closed.
Yeah, they
who would not have been there if they didn't
place.
have the day off work.
Yeah.
Or if the production had finished and he died the next day.
Yeah. No one would have been there.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
scary.
Yeah.
Work families are work families.
Yeah.
That's
not a substitute for your real family.
People you enjoy working with.
And then I enjoy leaving them at the end of the day.
Yeah. And like I do sometimes miss it.
Sure.
I got to do a ton of cool stuff. I'm glad I did it, but I would encourage anybody.
I think we're all glad we did the jobs we did.
Oh, 100%.
Sure.
They just weren't forever.
I'm definitely not the only person who had a shitty manipulative job in their early 20s.
Yeah, I did. I practiced medicine. That was shitty.
I would say anybody listening to this who's thinking of getting into that career to go into it with a maybe more skeptical mind than I think a lot of people go into it with. Because I wouldn't say don't do it. I would just say be careful about how you do it.
Before I started Lensrentals, I wanted to make my living in imaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a year and a half trying to make it as a photographer. And I made a sale, and it was an awesome sale. I'd taken a lot of pictures of Memphis. And I sold 30 prints, 60 copies each, to be the prints put in a hotel they were building for good money. And I thought, cool. never sold another thing. And 3 months after that sale, they went, oh, we're not building the hotel. So,
Yeah, I don't miss freelancing. Sometimes I miss, well, no, I do sometimes miss aspects of freelancing because I was full-time freelance for a while and here in Memphis. It's really hard to be freelance anywhere. And a lot of it is having to guess how much you need to charge for things because no one wants to talk about it. Everyone wants to keep their little secrets and keep their own little clients. No one wants to share anything. And I don't know if that's...
Everyone wants you for a second shooter, though.
Everyone wants you for a second shooter. And I've done a ton of that. In fact, I've made more money second shooting than I probably have anything else besides this job. It's frustrating. The other downside is like it's freelance. And so people don't think that they can unionize or they can, come together and like collectively bargain for things. I think the biggest problem is there's a lot of ego around being a freelancer because you feel like you have to be on your own. It's built up to be this thing. It's like you have to be out there fighting for yourself when really all of the freelancers are in it together, whether they want to be or not. They can either fight against each other and lose out, or they can fight together and raise all boats. Like
they should have it wouldn't be a union, be a guild.
A guild.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Freelancers Guild would be a great thing. There is a freelancer guild. I remember trying to join when I was freelancing.
Is it? Are we thinking the same thing? Is that called the Freelancers Union?
Yeah, I think it's called the Freelancers Guild, actually.
Oh, maybe. We'll link to it in any case. But I've heard of that. I haven't really researched it much.
There wasn't a big enough presence in Memphis to actually mean anything. The only thing I was going to be able to get out of it was like slightly cheaper health insurance. Like, all right, that's cool.
That's not an insignificant thing.
It's not an insignificant thing. It was less significant at the time.
Yeah, like, that is now.
Because that was 15 years ago. But yeah, that's
Joey's depressing story.
That's my and now I work here. Like I couldn't hack it. I couldn't make enough money as a freelancer, and I had tons of regular gigs. I had local newspaper had me on contract for like 5 of their publications. Like they had 5 magazines and I shot everything for those magazines every month for like 2 years. I was doing real estate constantly. I was shooting weddings. And I wasn't making enough. I was living check to check, month to month.
Yeah.
My girlfriend at the time was like trying to help pick up slack. Like we just bought a house and it just was never enough. And I ended up not being able to just do photography. I had to go get another job. I was a barista for a long time.
And that like hunting for jobs thing between jobs is so exhausting.
Right. And it's not like I wasn't putting in 40 plus hours a week. I definitely was. In fact, when I started doing my other jobs, I was putting in 80 hours a week. And it's like, I'm still not making enough money here.
You know, the other side I'm looking at is I think a lot of people that are here have found that niche where they're obviously eating well and they don't have to worry about, the next check, yet they're doing a lot of what they wanted to do in the first place. They're doing the art stuff. They're going out on the weekends and doing, I know there have been groups of our folks making indie films and stuff like that. That's really cool.
I feel much more creative now than when I was working as like a PA. Because you have the time and energy and resources to actually like do what you want to do.
And you're well fed.
Yeah.
Yeah. The day I started this job and I no longer had to shoot for anyone else was like the greatest day of my life.
And you do
also
fun, creative stuff that has no shot at paying for itself.
No, ever.
It doesn't have to make money, which is so great.
It's fulfilling.
And, that's me too. I started this thing because I loved photography.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And hated medicine.
Yeah.
But, I think many of us found a niche or a happy medium where we're doing the cool stuff we wanted to do and eating, and that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. Well, I'm glad we could end there on a positive note.
I think the takeaway, though, is it's a journey, and in some parts of it, you're going to do things and just decide, I need to make a right turn here.
Yeah.
And it's not the end of life. I hear people, they finish college, they start something, it's like, oh, wait, I don't really like this, and now my life is ruined.
Right.
And it's not that way.
It's not. Things take time, but if you don't take the time and then you look back years later and go, man, if I had just started it then, I could already be doing this other thing.
Right.
Every time.
And 10 bar, because you can always 10 bar.
You can always 10 bar. You can always
Easy
sling
peasy.
coffee. You can always wait tables.
Well, I'm probably not going to put a break in that one. It's the season finale.
I don't think we need a break.
Yeah, we're not going to put a break in. I won't put in a break.
There was a good gestalt to it, I think.
Yeah.
So I'll say what Allie normally says in the break, which is lensrentals.com/podcast for a discount code. And thank you for listening to this season of the Lens Rentals Podcast.
Hey,
Thank you for coming in, Joey and Roger.
Yeah, that's fun.
Pleasure. Bye.
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 Thanks for listening to the Lens Rentals Podcast. As always, make sure to visit lensrentals.com/podcast for a discount on your next order from us. And if you're enjoying the show, you can support it by subscribing and giving us a review on Apple Podcasts. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Lens Rentals, and thanks to Jacques Granger for our theme music. More of his work can be found at revengebodymemphis.bandcamp.com. Like we said, we're heading into a break, so there won't be any new episodes of the podcast for a bit, but stay subscribed so you know as soon as we come back. We'll talk to you soon on the next season of the Lens Rentals Podcast.